leveling up really does come down to respecting yourself. In relationships, respect is so very important. Respecting your husband simply means that even if you don't agree with him, you still honor his decisions for his life. I am so much more hyper aware with acquaintances or people who on very close terms with, whereas with my husband, we are so close. Hello, beautiful ones, and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be here with you for another video. In the case you are new here, my name is Leisha, and I've been documenting my personal leveling up journey since 2020 here on YouTube. I've been sharing my transformation from broke Beachum into elegant, feminine, and affluent woman. So if you have not yet, please subscribe, join in with me here every week, share this video with a friend who's leveling up with you, and I would love to see you here. This week, I'm continuing along with the Empowered Wife book discussion. And these are 6 surprising secrets for attracting your husband's time, attention, and affection. This is by Laura Doyle. If you are just now joining me, I would highly encourage you to go back and watch the previous 2 videos where I set up the book. I cover the introduction and then the first skill. This book is broken up into 6 intimacy skills. There's chapters covering each skill, and so there is a lot to it. And of course, there are disclaimers when it comes to this topic. It is a very controversial one, I must admit. The topic of marriage, relationships, and I really wish I had read this book in the beginning of my journey when I was first kind of treading the waters with my husband and looking to see, where are we on the same page? Where are we not? We've had some ups and downs surely throughout our almost 7 years of marriage now. But we have truly been partners throughout this journey. We have some areas where, again, like I said, it's been a challenge. Parenthood has brought in, a whole nother level, and every level of your journey, you are going to be challenged and need to grow in your relationships. And so your relationship is so very important. I think whether you are married or in a seriously committed relationship, this book is speaking to wives, of course, but I think if you are, of course, one day hoping to get married, you would probably be wise to read this book, pick it up. I think there's been a lot of good things. There haven't been too many things so far. Like I said, I'm just now on the second skill that I strongly disagree with. There has been a lot that has made me think, and that I don't mind experimenting with and seeing how, once I apply it and take action on it in my journey, how it works out for me. And so just like we see anyone here on the internet, we see them showing us their life or talking about different ideas, we should always think critically about those before we just take their words verbatim and as truth, right? We should consider them with our values, our desires, what we want to get out of life, and our personal circumstance, right? Because everyone is so unique. But if you are seeking after, I think for sure, a stronger marriage, you're looking to think about it differently. Your marriage, you see your husband as just one of the biggest obstacles, or your marriage is a big obstacle to your level up journey. This has actually been so very enlightening so far. So I can't wait to dive into the skill that we're discussing today. Let's go ahead and begin. Quickly before I get started, I wanted to see, I hope you like the hair. I just went to the salon this morning and I got a haircut. It has been so frizzy. It's been challenging postpartum to get my hair looking the way that I want it to look, or just, I've been trying to work on some better hair care habits lately, and the postpartum hairs are starting to grow back in, so it's been frizzier. I like it styled like this, and I think I'm gonna probably keep up with it a little bit. I'll get back on the styling train. So just wanted to mention that. And also my phone may go off while I am doing this video or sharing in this video, because my husband took our daughter to the snowball dance at our country club, and I'm going to be picking them up. I was the chauffeur, and it has been the most precious thing. So again, just wanted to share that. Okay, now we're going to get started. So skill number 2 is restore respect. And before I get some eye rolls, I think that it's such an important thing. We respect ourselves, of course. I have a video about that where I'm talking about, leveling up really does come down to respecting yourself. In relationships, respect is so very important. This skill is a very good reminder for me, because let me just read you how Laura has set this up. Respecting your husband simply means that even if you don't agree with him, you still honor his decisions for his life. A respectful wife can listen to her husband talk without offering suggestions or helpful tips. And a woman who respects her husband will apologize when she's disrespectful, just like she would apologize for being cranky or being late. And I thought of how many times I am so much more hyper aware with acquaintances or people who I'm not even on very close terms with. Whereas with my husband, we are so close, and just like many women, I think, fall into the comfort space of marriage and don't dress up anymore, don't put any effort into their image or caring for themselves. We become comfortable in our behavior and our displays of respect and our apologies for being disrespectful, thinking, oh, this man loves me, I can do no wrong. And so this was such a good reminder for me, because I'll have to admit, sometimes I have found myself being disrespectful, and I probably am not even aware that I'm being disrespectful. So of course that is going to create some conflict in a relationship, because as Laura describes with a man, respect is oxygen for him. It's like his oxygen. Again, I love that in the first couple of pages where she sets up the skill, she gives you a practical application that you can work on. And I love to take things and try them out and see how they work and really give it, if I feel like it is solid advice or reasonable advice, I like to give it a try, especially when, Laura has provided so many examples that are encouraging, I think, and just with her own marriage. So chapter 7, what were you thinking when you said yes to the dress? She is really diving in here to recalling when you first got married. What were the reasons that you said yes to marrying this man, and why have you rewritten your relationship story? I love how she has a whole section about that, because as I'm sure many of us have, we do try to justify our actions when we see a poor result, and we have a bit of an ego about it. And so many women, she says, and herself in this, she's talking about her relationship and her situation. She read an article that had convinced her, because she got married young, she was more likely to fail in her marriage anyways. And so it's okay to be considering divorce, and how a lot of young couples just don't work out. And so I think that we do need to be very careful about the content we're consuming. Again, I have said this, I think, several times about leveling up, is that when you surround yourself with like-minded people and people who are on the same path as you or working towards the same goal, we all may have different paths to get to a goal. So I don't want to say it like that, but we may have different paths and some different goals, but ultimately, we are on this journey of leveling up, and so we want to surround ourselves with others who are on that journey too. And so be careful what information or opinions you're hearing, and make sure that you understand for yourself, what's the truth, what's not the truth, what am I just kind of making up about my situation. And that can be tough. I will admit, when I read this, I thought, okay, I can easily see how, looking back, someone could believe they made a mistake in marrying their husband or getting into that relationship too soon. I think for ourselves, though, we have to take a good hard look. That is hard, right? To do some of the looking in the mirror and getting really honest. It's tough. Okay, going to just check this message. All right, I have to go and get them, but I will continue this later on. I will come back. Okay, I'm back. I told you all that this series was going to be very casual. She almost turned into a pumpkin. She's in bed now, so I'm going to do my best to continue along with this discussion. Okay, I think I left off on where rewriting your relationship story can be detrimental to your marriage. And Laura is talking about that. Next, I wanted to go on to how she's stating that, every man has flaws. She reminds us that, she believes your husband is a good guy, that you did marry him for a reason. And so what were the good qualities that you saw in him then? She believes that they're probably still there. And also, this is something that she states as well in this chapter that I think would be very hard to wrap your head around if you're not married yet, or maybe you are in the level up community and you are kind of having some regrets right now. She says, we can't really marry up or marry down. We wouldn't match. That's one of the laws of nature. We can only marry our match. Whoa, that is definitely some food for thought, but it makes sense to me, I think, in some ways, where I realize, okay, certainly as we grow, we are kind of expanding and leveling up, right, in our life. And it can feel like we do that at a different pace than perhaps our spouse is. And so I can definitely understand that, and that's sort of how I was wrapping my head around this. I do think that those of us who perceive ourselves to perhaps marry up or be on a level up journey to marry up, your main, I think, work is in improving yourself, right? So that then you are a match for that person that you want to be with, right? I think what is so important there is to make sure that you are being authentic to yourself as you continue to grow, and that you realize that a lot of the development that it can take for you to marry up to get to that level, it may take a while. It may take you some time. It might not come instantly. It could. I don't think it's healthy to attach ourselves to expectations of a timeline for a certain outcome. I really like to leave, anything could happen, right? I like to leave that open, and you just never know. You never know what could come your way, what relationship falls into your path and you are a match for. I think that, I don't know, this is still, again, like I said, the way that I try to wrap my brain around it is just that we do, I think, go through growth if we have been married for a few years and we're just now kind of starting this journey. If you've been married for decades and, you're kind of noticing this, like it seems like you're not on the same page, I think that's probably, something to think about and consider, and realize and accept that your man is still the man that has all these amazing qualities, but now you are kind of growing, and there's a lot more that she covers where I think it's helpful to consider if you just feel like he's not on the same page with you in improving himself. And she talks about her husband in that way throughout this book, which is very relatable, and I think could be encouraging for you to read about. Let's move on to chapter 8 now. Chapter 8 is Your Husband Doesn't Want Your Opinion, and I wanted to definitely tell you the title of this because that's tough for me to hear. I think in our marriage, we do give our opinions back and forth on things quite often, and my husband will ask me, what should I wear? He was asking me what he should wear to the dance tonight, with the daddy-daughter dance, and so, giving him my true opinion is the way that I've just always approached those situations where I'm asked for my opinion, right? The way that Laura talks about this is interesting. She states here, my connection with my husband is a higher priority than needing to demonstrate that I am a smarty pants. And so the way that she's framing up, don't be so forward with your opinions, is that oftentimes we are because we think we're smarter than our spouse is. And this was a really good reminder for me, where she goes into basically saying that men do things differently from women, and it's hard to realize that, again, from what she talks about in the introduction, where she frames up the differences between men and women.
and how in society we've been conditioned as women to see ourselves more as equals, like equally smart, equally able to do anything that a man can do, right? That's kind of how we're conditioned, I think, these days. And while it's great to be empowered and to step into your abilities, in a relationship, I thought that was interesting how she highlighted that just because a man does something, his way doesn't mean that he's not as smart as you and you should give him your opinion on how to do it your way. I thought that was definitely something I wanted to highlight about this chapter. This is the part of skill number 2 where I think you can really gain some ground as far as restoring respect with your husband. And she talks about learning these phrases to use in communication. Whatever you think, so that's the phrase, I'll put it here on the screen, whatever you think, and I hear you. Okay, so she goes through this other section of this chapter kind of where talking about listening and highlighting again that your desires are actually more powerful than your opinions. And so using these phrases allows you to be a listener without sharing your opinion and perhaps starting a disagreement or a big argument again. And let me just say that these 2 phrases have started to help me so much. I need to get better at saying them because, as she explains, some of her relationship coaching clients have stated, saying these phrases can feel like quote unquote sandpaper in their mouth, when you are saying these things and you so badly want to be helpful and give your opinion, as we perceive ourselves to be helpful when we do share what we really think. And what she's saying though is that you can, again, be respectful without sharing your opinion and still be true to yourself in this way of responding with whatever you think. And again, I hear you. And I actually realized that in my job, I have had supervisors that use the phrase, I hear you, a lot. And so I think that it is a good phrase to apply in probably many situations that you might find yourself in socially where you just don't agree with what's being said, but rather than either detract from the conversation or come off as being a very argumentative personality or you don't know the people very well, I hear you as you're expressing that you're listening and you hear someone's either problem or opinion, but you don't need to share yours. So I thought that was really interesting and could be very useful. The other thing that she highlights here that I wanted to also highlight is that there's a difference between saying whatever you think and whatever you want. When you say whatever you want, you're kind of almost, the way that she phrased it, let me go back. I don't want to butcher her words because I think that she goes into saying that you want to honor your inner smarty pants. I like the way she puts that. But when you say whatever you want, your husband wants to make you happy. So again, going back to expressing your desires, but he doesn't want to have to figure that out. Okay, so basically when you say whatever you want, you're kind of leaving it to be vague, and the man is perceiving that he needs to go and figure it out to make you happy. And that's a difference between saying whatever you think, because you are essentially showing you trust his decision, his ability and capabilities, and you trust him. She goes deeper into the whole trust sort of issue and working through that a little bit, where, if you are in a relationship with someone that you feel like you have to nag constantly to get to do even the smallest little teeniest tiny bit of responsibility in your home or your life, she talks a lot about that trust factor there. And so again, I thought this was it was hard to hear at first, but a really helpful chapter because she sets up that conversational piece that you can go and apply. So it's not just all fluff. I love that. Okay, chapter 9 is why wives cause most divorces and what to do instead. And I had to highlight this in the beginning because that's a bold statement again, that wives cause most divorces. I see a lot of women too that of course blame the man for the divorce, and of course there's all kinds of reasons that people get divorced, and so I don't want to get into that, but I think that this is this is interesting. So she says, think back to what your husband was like when you first met, and he was always making you laugh, telling you how wonderful you are, bringing you presents perhaps to show you he was thinking of you. Would you want to be in a relationship with that guy? Because he's the guy who will show up once you begin implementing the 6 intimacy skills. So after reading that, I decided to keep reading through this chapter. And this is the chapter where she goes deeper into the nagging aspect. And, in fact, that's what she says. A Wall Street Journal article ran that nagging causes more divorces than affairs do. That's a bold statement, because I think we like to think that, a lot of men cause the problems and have the affairs and that sort of thing. And it's not always the case that this article is claiming. I should link that article below. I did want to read it. I have not read it, so that's a disclaimer. I have not read this article, so it could be just, total rubbish, but that's apparently what it said. Nagging causes more divorces than affairs do. Do you agree? Do you think that's true? I would love to see your comment below. So the last thing I'm going to cover in this chapter 9 that I wanted to discuss was the sort of being helpful when we're giving our opinions, and how, again, we perceive ourselves to be helpful. She is saying here that the helpful suggestion is actually perceived often as disrespect. The wife doesn't often realize this. She's convinced that she's just trying to help. And I relate to that so much. And I think that this has been something in the past. I will hear my husband express a goal or a problem he's trying to work through. I'll offer my opinion on it, and maybe even what's worked for me in the same situation or similar situation. And it's not really something that is met very positively in our conversation. Sometimes we'll go back and forth too much about it. And I'm now thinking about this statement here she's making, that it's seen as disrespect. I'm going to read this again. She puts this so well. One of the most tragic situations that I commonly see is a woman saying, I had to divorce him because he was so mean and grumpy all the time. I was miserable and he was miserable, so clearly we weren't compatible. Really, what happened is that she was being unwittingly disrespectful and her husband was responding in an angry, defensive manner. And so she's saying that if you're not careful and you don't realize that your opinion being given can be perceived as disrespectful, your husband's just going to be grumpy to be around a lot of the time if he's constantly being disrespected. Again, it's hard to realize and flip that perspective, but it makes sense to me now. Let me know what you think. Chapter 10, I'm going to kind of breeze through. It is titled Your Husband is Smarter Than You Think. And again, this chapter points back to how men and women are different and think about things differently. And so I've kind of already talked about that. She just goes into a lot more depth with that in this chapter. It is worth reading. I'm just kind of skipping over it for time. But again, this is encouraging. She's got so many examples in here of women that she has worked with who have applied these principles and restored their respect in their relationship, and how it's actually improved their prosperity in their home as a couple and as a family. And let me just tell you this, I would say it's true, because as a personal example, so my husband loves golf, and I saw how much he enjoyed it and thought, okay, this is something I can encourage in him. It does take a little bit of leveling up, I think, to be able to, afford it at the level he wants to. He loves it so much. And so rather than looking at the negative aspect, which would be, okay, it's several hours on a weekend that he would be away, not doing things around the house, and who knows, if he's just out there kind of goofing off with his buddies, or people who are just probably going to influence him negatively. I looked at it as a very positive thing and saw how much he loved it. He wanted to actually improve. He wasn't using it to just like drink, and my husband doesn't drink, so it was a healthy thing I saw, and so I encouraged it, and it's such a lovely thing to be a part of in our life now, but it required him to improve, his earning ability to be able to afford the level that he wanted to be able to afford. So now we're country club members, and we enjoy that, and that's primarily, I think, why. Again, I wish I had time to read these examples. I don't really have time, but you should get the book. Okay, so wrapping up this video, there's some really good content and advice from Laura in here about treating your husband with honor and respect, and how that compares to how, as women, if you have children, you kind of treat your children, and kind of working through not honoring your children and parenting your husband. And maybe I could do a separate video on this later. I'm still working through some of this myself. I've only been a mother for 1 year now, just a little over a year. And so I feel like I have a lot to work through on this, but this is a deep conversation. And Laura talks about how you speak about your husband in front of your children and your family really impacts not just your husband, but also your children. And so, again, I wish I had time to go through this, but I don't know that it's very important to like the discussion around leveling up and bringing your husband along in that and empowering yourself as a wife. So the last thing that she mentions in this skill that will help you to restore respect is to sort of fake it until you make it. And that is, I think, I don't know, that's one of the things I've gone back and forth with with my personal level up journey, the whole faking it until you make it kind of thing. I think that sometimes our minds are hard to be tricked into that, living out what we're trying to make it to. And so there's a lot, I think, around this. You can do like journaling about the way that you are going to show and restore respect to your husband. You can journal about your communication or just different things that are different interactions that happen between you, and kind of work that out and see how you could improve it for next time. I think that you have to find your balance with faking it until you make it, right? You can't, like I said, it's hard to trick your brain into believing something that is just not there. But I get what she's saying. If you continue to practice these skills and practice the communication aspects of restoring respect, it becomes easier. And Laura, in fact, says that for her, it is a lot easier to just say whatever you think or I hear you, rather than hurt the relationship further. You get to some point where it's clear what you're doing is not working. And so perhaps trying these things that feel difficult and like you're being fake will help you to get into a different practice and a different rhythm and restore that respect that you're looking for and that your husband really needs, right? After all, she says it's like a man's oxygen. The last part of this chapter that she shares is an excerpt from a podcast where she is interviewing a woman about her marriage who she says has a marriage full of tension and conflict. So I think that this may be interesting. You can go listen to it. It's the Empowered Wife podcast, episode 96. If you would like to listen to that on one of your walks this week or in the car on your drive. I am going to leave this part of the discussion around skill number 2 at that. And in the next video, I will be sharing skill number 3, and we'll be discussing that as far as this book goes. And so thank you so much for joining me this week. Make sure, again, if you have not caught up on the previous 2 videos, you do that before you make assumptions about the way that this book is headed. And but I do want to hear your comments and experiences down below. Again, I'm trying to enjoy this discussion as I'm working through and applying some of these skills myself. So thank you again for joining me. I will see you in the next video. Bye.